Welcome to Bards and Cards. This episode features the 19th century English writer Christina Rosetti. Poet Christina Rosetti was born in 1830, the youngest child in an extraordinarily gifted family. Her father, the Italian poet and political exile Gabriele Rosetti, immigrated to England in 1824 and established a career as a Dante scholar and teacher of Italian in London. He married the half-English, half-Italian Frances Polidori in 1826. They had 4 children. Their mother, who had been trained as a governess, was committed to cultivating intellectual excellence in her family and provided early education for her children. All of them had impressive careers, but we're focusing here on Christina, who became one of the Victorian age's finest poets. She was the author of numerous books of poetry, including Goblin Market and Other Poems, The Prince's Progress, A Pageant, and The Face of the Deep. Throughout her career, Christina's brother, the pre-Raphaelite artist Dante Gabriele Rossetti, not only critiqued her work, but also negotiated with publishers, assisted with book design, corrected proofs, and provided illustrations for her publications. In return, she modeled for some of his paintings and drawings. As Goblin Market and Other Poems was being prepared for the press, he advised on the selection of poems, suggested dividing them into secular and devotional sections, and proposed new titles for some, including the title poem, which was originally called A Peep at the Goblins. He also provided frontispiece and title page designs drawn from that poem. Christina Rosetti's work attained only moderate recognition in her lifetime. However, critical interest in her poetry resurged in the late 20th century due to the emergence of feminist criticism. Much of this commentary focuses on gender issues in her poetry and on Rosetti as a woman poet. Many feminists now see her as a symbol of constrained female genius and a leader among 19th century poets. Christina Rosetti was deeply devoted to her Christian faith, and much of her poetry was influenced by religion and the idea of sin. Her best-known poem, Goblin Market, can be read as a straightforward moral allegory of temptation, indulgence, sacrifice, and redemption. It was undoubtedly influenced by the 11 years Rosetti spent as a volunteer at the St. Mary Magdalene Penitentiary in Highgate, which tried to rehabilitate and provide refuge to fallen women who had turned to prostitution to survive. Besides providing shelter and training in useful skills, these religious penitentiaries required the women they served to repent their sexual deviance. Rosetti kept a wide circle of friends and correspondents. She continued to write and publish for her entire life. In her later years, she wrote mainly devotional work and children's poetry. The last 20 years of her life were painful and difficult, as she suffered first from Graves' disease and later from breast cancer. She died on the 29th of December, 1893, and was buried in the family grave on the west side of Highgate Cemetery in London. And now I will read some excerpts from Goblin Market. This is the tale of 2 young women, sisters Laura and Lizzie, and their meeting with goblins selling fruit which carries a dark enchantment. Laura succumbs to the goblins' tempting cries and tastes the forbidden fruit. When she begins to waste away, Lizzie, spurred by sisterly love, goes to the forbidden Goblin Market. She returns covered in juice from the charmed fruit and urges Laura to lick the juice from her face. Laura does and is ultimately cured of the goblin's curse. By the end of the poem, both sisters have grown, married, and have children of their own. and they use their own experience with the Goblin Market to warn their daughters about giving in to temptation. So the poem begins. Morning and evening maids heard the goblins cry, "Come buy our orchard fruits, come buy, come buy. Our grapes fresh from the vine, pomegranates full and fine, dates and sharp bullaces, rare pears and greengages, damsons and bilberries, taste them and try, currants and gooseberries, bright fire-like barberries, figs to fill your mouth, citrons from the south, sweet to tongue and sound to eye. Come buy, come buy." Evening by evening, among the brookside rushes, Laura bowed her head to hear, Lizzie veiled her blushes, crouching close together in the cooling weather, with clasping arms and cautioning lips, with tingling cheeks and fingertips. "Lie close," Laura said, pricking up her golden head. "We must not look at goblin men, we must not buy their fruits. Who knows upon what soil they've fed their hungry, thirsty roots?" "Come buy," called the goblins, hobbling down the glen. "Oh," cried Lizzie, "Laura, Laura, you should not peep at goblin men." Lizzie covered up her eyes, covered close lest they should look. Laura reared her glossy head and whispered like the restless brook, "Look, Lizzie, look, Lizzie." Down the glen tramp little men. One hauls a basket, one bears a plate, one lugs a golden dish of many pounds weight. How fair the vine must grow, whose grapes are so luscious! How warm the wind must blow through those fruit bushes! "No," said Lizzie, "no, no, no. Their offers should not charm us, their evil gifts would harm us." She thrust a dimpled finger in each ear, shut eyes, and ran. Curious Laura chose to linger, wondering at each merchant man. One had a cat's face, one whisked a tail, one tramped at a rat's pace, one crawled like a snail, one like a wombat proud, obtuse, and furry, one like a rattle, tumbled hurry-scurry. She heard a voice, like voice of doves, cooing all together. They sounded kind and full of loves in the pleasant weather. At this point, Laura, beguiled by the sight, goes to the goblins, and she eats their fruit. She returns home in the morning, vowing to return the next evening for more of the intoxicating fruit. However, she soon discovers that she can no longer hear their call. But Lizzie still can. Months go by, and Laura begins to waste away, still craving the goblin fruit that she can no longer obtain. Lizzie, desperate to save her sister, goes to the goblins to buy fruit to bring back to Laura. She knows better than to taste any of the fruit herself. The goblins try to force her to eat, but only end up smearing fruit and juice on Lizzie's face. Back to the poem. "One may lead a horse to water, 20 cannot make him drink. Though the goblins cuffed and caught her, coaxed and fought her, bullied and besought her, scratched her, pinched her black as ink, kicked and knocked her, mauled and mocked her, Lizzie uttered not a word, would not open lip from lip, lest they should cram a mouthful in, but laughed in heart to feel the drip of juice that syruped all her face, and lodged in dimples of her chin, and streaked her neck, which quaked like curd. At last the evil people, worn out by her resistance, flung back her penny, kicked their fruit along whichever road they took, not leaving root or stone or shoot. Some writhed into the ground, some dived into the brook. With ring and ripple, some scudded on the gale without a sound, some vanished in the distance." So when Lizzie returns home, she kisses her sister and urges her to lick the juice off her face and neck to satisfy her craving. Ultimately, that juice breaks the enchantment that Laura is under, and she recovers. Rosetti ends the poem with, days, weeks, months, years afterwards, when both were wives with children of their own, their mother hearts beset with fears, their lives bound up in tender lives, Laura would call the little ones and tell them of her early prime, those pleasant days long gone, of not returning home, of not returning time, would talk about the haunted glen, the wicked, quaint fruit merchant men, their fruits like honey to the throat, but poison in the blood. Men sell not such in any town. Would tell them how her sister stood in deadly peril to do her good, and win the fiery antidote. Then joining hands to little hands would bid them cling together, for there is no friend like a sister in calm or stormy weather, to cheer one on the tedious way, to fetch one if one goes astray, to lift one if one totters down, to strengthen whilst one stands. And so with the end of Goblin Market, it is time now for the cards section of this video, all for entertainment purposes only. Stay tuned. For this reading, I am very happy to have the Goblin Market Tarot, which was created, inspired by Christina Rosetti's Goblin Market poem. So now, I would call upon the spirit, the author of the Goblin Market, Christina Rosetti. Is there a message you could share with those of us who still appreciate your work so very, very much? Okay. We have the sunroom, the Lord of Crowns, and the Nine of Cups. From the research I've done on Christina Rosetti and her very strict adherence to her Catholic faith and the theme of avoiding temptation that runs through a lot of her work, or being redeemed from temptation, these are rather happier cards than I might have expected, because the sunroom is about joy and contentment and good health, good relationships, good parties, just everything you want life to be, to enjoy. Now, the Lord of Crowns does bring in a more disciplined influence, because this is a person who is quite sensible, but is very much in charge. So, all right, there's a sense of authority that in order to achieve the happiness, the joy, the contentment, the good life, one must follow the rules. And then the Nine of Cups here is also a very happy card. It is about success, successful outcome. There is a danger with this card of overindulgence in too much pleasure. So here we go, getting that lesson of bringing balance, not to overdo, yet at the same time, both these cards are far more revelrous, celebratory, given to indulging in the pleasures of life. And I also notice we have the sunroom here, but look at the Nine of Cups, just the shape of this creature, this goblin. On the card is in an arc like the moon. So we have the sun and the moon. Speaking of cycles, and then the Lord of Crowns here, authority, sensibility, getting things under control as the balancing element. So what I'm reading from this is that maybe unlike the impression I have of Christina Rosetti, there's much more the urge to be free and to enjoy oneself. Just don't let it get out of control. And that seems to fit, doesn't it, very much with someone who wrote about giving in to temptation and how it was better not to go too far. Very much appropriate. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you to Ms. Rosetti for communicating with us. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will return with another episode of Bards and Cards. Goodbye for now.